I think that the future success of business is going to be defined by how effective they are at getting people to learn.
Welcome to another episode of the Stay Hungry podcast, where we explore how organizations can turn knowledge into a strategic asset. In today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Sandra Loughlin, Chief Learning Scientist at EPAM Systems. As a global leader in building complex digital systems, EPAM guides both clients and employees through continuous transformation. Sandra shares how the company has made learning a core part of its DNA and unpacks how they built a scalable skills ecosystem, consistently turning knowledge into action and action into measurable business results. Sandra, a very warm welcome to Stay Hungry. To get us started and get a little bit of background, could you briefly introduce EPAM Systems in your role and your journey so far?
Yes. So EPAM Systems, as you said, it's a global, 60,000 person professional services organization. So we match people to work, right? We're for client projects. And we are primarily composed of some of the world's leading software engineers, AI, and data experts. And what we do is build custom platforms and digital products for our clients. So what this means is if you're interacting on your phone or online in your workplace with some very complex system, chances are EPAM has had a hand in helping to build that. My role is kind of unique. I am not a technologist. I came to this work very differently. My role now is to help oversee and coordinate all of our educational activities within and outside the company. So what this means is education, of course, for our employees, so all 60,000 people in like 50 different countries, but it's far beyond that. So we also have a very large gig workforce that we educate and develop. We have kids programs for seniors in our communities. We have over 200 university partnerships where we actually build our talent pipeline. We have degree programs, we have boot camps, we have graduate certificates. And of course, we also do a lot of work to educate our clients. So my job is to kind of pull all of those things together, make sure that they are efficient and working together to drive our business strategy.
Tell me about that, because it's a two-folded approach that you have.
We do, amongst other things, skills-based performance management. So what this means is that at EPAM, you cannot keep your job and you cannot grow in your career unless you are demonstrating the skills that are required for your job. And because, we're an evolving organization, the expectations for the skills for jobs are constantly evolving as well. And so what this means is that we're in a position where we have employees who need to learn things on an ongoing basis. And because their job is tied to that, and it's just an expectation of the role, they are always learning and they're demanding high quality learning. Everyone knows, right, that, you don't really learn from access to content. That is a relatively small piece, actually, of a true effective learning environment. And so when our employees pull learning, they're not pulling content, they're pulling effective learning experiences. And that includes formal learning. So this would be course, content. But it's also, and more importantly, a lot of practice and a lot of feedback and a lot of assessment so people know where they stand. And more importantly, it means informal learning. So, employees want to understand how they can shadow someone, where they can practice their skills in a lower stakes environment, what conferences to attend, what communities of practice to join, who to follow on LinkedIn, right? These are the kinds of, this is a learning infrastructure that is created when you have employees who are pulling learning because they are truly incentivized to learn.
There's so much to unpack here. How do you manage to orchestrate all that internally, first of all?
Yeah, so I think it all, again, boils down to, and this sounds so like uncool, but it's just data, right? Like the
Right.
company has always been oriented toward collecting and using data on employees to improve their experiences and by extension improve business outcomes, right? If you have the right people in the right roles that they're excited about with the right skills, right? And you have those people knowing what the next skills are that they need to learn and then feeling supported and incentivized to learn, you're going to get this virtuous cycle of, having great business outcomes because you have optimized the employee base. And so the way that, again, they went about doing this is it was all started from staffing and it was all from the business. Like the way that EPAM was founded, we didn't have HR. We didn't have a real formal people organization until 20 years after we were founded, when we had our IPO, and we had to have that, right? Until then, it was the business. The business was just our business is people, and they realized that they needed to have all of this information and the support structures to optimize people for the work. And so the way that this is, it's easy to explain system, but essentially what we have is all of these data feeds coming to us on two different things. So one is, what are the skills the business needs? So this is information that comes from, labor market data, where we're looking at, what are our competitors hiring for, what are they trying to solve from a business perspective. But it also comes from a lot of internal data on what are our clients asking for, our most cutting edge clients, what are the skills that they're demanding. And then on top of that, what are the patents that are being developed? What are the new technologies that are coming out? And then we also have experts in the business who are their business is understanding their area. We also crowdsource from them and colleagues that they have inside and outside the business. What are the skills they expect to see coming down the pike? So you have all of these data sources coming together to help us get a sense of what are the skills that our business needs both today and tomorrow. So that's, I would consider, the denominator. What do we need? We also have very rich data on the numerator. What is it that we have? So we have all these data sources, both from inference and from verification, in terms of what skills any individual has in our organization. So both employees, but also in our gig workforce and in our talent pipeline. So we're using all these different sources of data to kind of get this high quality skills profile of every person. And we can match that, so that's the numerator, to the denominator for their role, for the geography, for the project, for the industry, whatever it is. And because of that, we're able to, again, have really good data on supply and demand. And then the whole purpose of the people organization is to close that delta, the delta between supply and demand. And that happens through hiring for the right skills. It comes through internal mobility. It comes through learning. It comes through all these different sources. But without understanding the supply and demand, the people organization, and by extension, the business, would be just kind of doing stuff without knowing if that stuff was really needed and if that stuff was creating the change that was required.
That's brilliant, because then the business obviously decides what skills we as an organization need. But I'm curious, how does the informal learning play out in your organization?
From the very, very beginning, our leaders decided not to procure vendor technology. So if you think about, any organization, they tend to have dozens, hundreds, sometimes up to 1,000 different systems in their business to help run the business. So everything from your CRM, your ATS, right, your LMS, your HCM, your systems of managing projects. The entire business, right, is run with a lot of complex software. And EPAM decided early on to not get all that software from others, but instead to build it ourselves. And there's a long story for how that works, and it's actually kind of been the secret to our success. But so what we have is this. So we're building tools to do all these different use cases over time. And one of those tools, my favorite tool, I think, that we have at EPAM, which is, again, is custom. It's it's only used for us. We don't sell it. It's not a product that is out there on the market. It's just what we have internally. It's a system called Level Up. And Level Up is, I've never seen it on the market, anything like it, but it's a combination of learning and career development that is all, again, grounded in data. And so there are several ways that this works. And so one is that I can go into the system, which of course knows me and it knows my skills and it knows what I've worked on, it knows what I am going to work on next. And I can type in any role in the business, any role. And the system will automatically populate for me both formal learning. So again, all of our courses plus practical tasks and mentors and feedback and assessment and all that other stuff. Like it creates this huge formal learning program for me based on my skills and based on like my time horizon. So if I want to, do this new role in 3 years, it'll give me like a structured, like a formal learning plan. But it also will give me all of these informal learning opportunities. And so we have an acronym at EPAM called STRIVE, STRIVE, and that's how we structure our informal learning. So S is social learning, so it will give me mentors or people to observe, or even to follow on like LinkedIn, for example. T is teaching others, so it'll give me the opportunity to be a mentor, both to other employees, but to our gig workforce, to our university students, right? It helps, you learn a lot by teaching others. So we have that. R is reflection. So a lot of learning happens because people actually like think about their practice, right? And think about what went wrong. And so there's all of these different prompts that you can use. Now with Gen AI, it makes it even better to actually structure reflective practice so that I'm reflecting on my work and what I'm learning through the lens of, what I'm trying to achieve. STRI is investigation. So this is actually where we help people identify places where they can go and search for more information. So again, Gen AI has really helped in the past couple of years with that, but we'll give people prompts on like what to search for, like what to prompt LinkedIn or prompt ChatGPT or whatever, right, to learn from. Google and other spaces too, right? Or to ask other people, right? There's like all these different prompts. STRIV is vocational. So what we mean by this are professional communities of practice or conferences or other things where you're going to network with and learn from people in your field. So there's all these different links to, again, like what to go, who to follow, what publications to read, like that kind of stuff. And then E is experiential. And so this is where we link people to projects that they can join to help, build some skills, extra mile activities. So volunteer activities, both inside the company and in the community. So these are all like these many, many different sources that we use. Now, so what I just described is what I would prompt the system to do. But we know that a lot of people don't necessarily think about that. And so we've also built the system so it will prompt me. And so it knows my role. It knows that, it knows that I have this broad goal. It knows that, my job has, the expectations for my role have evolved since the last time, right? And it will tell me, hey, Sandra, you have some skills gaps. You need to close these skill gaps in this time horizon. Either to keep my current job, right, or to continue to evolve. And so we have all of these different ways of helping people understand what their skills are today and what skills they need to stay at EPAM, whether it's in their current job, in a goal, like a new job that they want to go to. And we also prompt them to say, hey, there are these other roles for you that are highly matched to your skills. And these roles are in high demand, like, they might pay better, they might have, other kind of perks that I would really like. So the system will prompt me to say, hey, are you interested in learning this, in this job or learning this skill? And so there's, both push and pull ways for me to get a sense of what do I want to learn? And why do I want to learn it, right? Again, what is the motivation? And we're very concerned about making that extremely transparent for people so that they have a lot of understanding of their career and a lot of transparency and a lot of agency in designing their path forward.
Going back to Strive, I really thought that was a really great acronym to use. I'm super curious about skills and tasks because obviously they are related. How are they related? What's your perspective on that?
So it's very interesting. For the past year or so, I've been talking a lot about skills, and I've been hearing a lot of people talking about skills and this whole like skills-based organization concept, which EPAM, embodies. And it's fascinating to me that people talk only about skills, like it's the only thing that matters, but it's absolutely not. In fact, from my point of view, and I think based on EPAM's history and how we work, the most foundational data element is not skills, it's tasks. Because as a business, you need to get work done, right? And tasks are essentially the granular like unit of analysis to articulate what work has to get done in the business. So this to me is the initial foundation for what skills do you need. You don't know what skills you need unless you know what work needs to be done. So when you kind of identify the tasks that need to get done in the organization in any role across the board, whatever, it's relatively easy then to derive, well, what are the skills required to do that task? So now you have your skills denominator, what you need, but it only comes because you have task information. So that's one connection point between skills and tasks. Tasks are the foundations for skills. But the other one, I mean, there are several, but the other big one, I think, is the fact that for us, skills are not this like theoretical like concept, right? Skills have to be measurable. And the way that you measure skills is through behavior. Usually, and the most authentic way to measure skills and learning, for what it's worth, is by having people perform a task that is close to or the same as the task that they would do in their job, right? The best way, the best evidence for someone being able to do a job is to see them do that job, and that's a task analysis. And so for us, another connection point is that we use tasks to evaluate and to get skills data. It's not the only thing that we do, but it's one of the most valuable sources of skills data. And so for us, right, like those are very, very important connections. And I can't, we wouldn't function effectively as a business without having both sides of the coin: work, tasks, and workers' skills.
Hmm. And you obviously have digital tools to help you support this work. Are they helping you mapping out the tasks in your organization and the tasks needed for the future as well to
Yes.
guide this and orchestrate the knowledge sharing?
Yes, absolutely. So again, that's the same source as the data, right? So we're looking at labor market data. So labor market data, the way that most companies do this right now is that they are pulling skills data, but actually what you should do is start pulling task data from the same data
Right.
sources. It's the same stuff, right? So you start by pulling task data, and that will give you like the granular understanding of like what the work is. Of course, you need to like when you get that data, it's like generic, and so you need to customize that for your business. But so that's one source of data that we have. But again, we also are looking at because we're project based, because we're professional services, we're also, and we always have, defined project work in terms of tasks. So we have that coming in. And yes, we do try to look, down the line to see what are the tasks that are coming down the pike. The problem is that it's actually easier to talk about what's the technology and what are broadly the skills. But until we have the tools in front of us and we have to apply them, we don't necessarily know all the tasks. So the forward-looking indicators, looking like in our crystal ball, right, trying to look into the future, are actually better for skills than they are for tasks. Because essentially, like once we have new technology or new whatever, we have to apply that thing to processes that are made up of a bunch of tasks. And then the processes ultimately have to change. And so like the task data from a forward-looking perspective is a little bit harder to derive than the skills data.
Hmm. So you have the data for the tasks, you have obviously for the skills. How do you make sure that the new knowledge is actually activated as well so that employees are putting it into play to create that business value? Because that can take obviously some time, because you also have to do certain bets that these kinds of skills and these kinds of tasks are demanded in the future.
Right.
You have to go down that path. How do you manage to work with that dynamic?
We look at is delta in what employees know and can do before and after learning. And again, learning can be formal or informal. But the way that we essentially do this is before any sort of learning program or learning initiative or like whatever, we will start by measuring the baseline. So ideally, we're looking at task data, but it could be a variety of different sources. But it will give us an idea of what someone knows or can do before we intervene. And then we say to them, hey, you need to learn this thing. And here's how it looks in practice. And we give them formal and informal opportunities to learn. We give them all these different resources and time. And then we will measure again, how well are they doing this? Now, again, the measurement for this is going to be a lot of different sources. If it's a formal learning program, it's going to be a direct, performance measure. Regardless, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But when we're looking at measuring the potential to transfer knowledge from, learning experiences into practice, we do that by looking at directional indicators. So we know if somebody has learned something at the end of a learning program or an intervention, because we've measured it. And if the subsequent business outcome isn't happening, now we have eliminated a variable. We know that the people know it. So there must be some other reason that we're not seeing those behaviors translated into business outcomes. Is it because of, and then we go through the list of reasons that a person might not act, even though they know to act. So there's all of that. But now we'll get into, which I think is very important. How do you structure learning programs so that people actually know to act if they have the opportunity? And that is something a little bit different, right? It actually goes to effective pedagogy. And effective pedagogy requires that you understand that there are 3 different kinds of knowledge. So there's declarative knowledge, so what you can repeat back. There is procedural knowledge, so knowing the process. And then importantly, there is conditional knowledge. Under what conditions should I apply this thing, right? And in most learning programs that I've seen out in the world, they primarily focus on declarative and maybe procedural, but very little on conditional. So when we build our learning programs, we are constantly building in, here's when you would use this thing. Here are all of these different scenarios in which you would apply this thing. Here are anti-patterns. Here are ways that people often will apply it, but it's the wrong place to apply it. So we actually try to really explain how to, when you're in the wild, how employees will know to apply this thing, right? So there's all of these different levels of complexity when it comes to getting people to transfer learning into the workplace. They first need to recognize opportunities to do that, which is a pedagogical challenge. And then they have to actually, it has to be relatively easy for them to apply it. Because if you have all these barriers of misaligned processes or bad tools or bad incentives or whatever, even if someone recognizes it, they won't necessarily do it because it's not in their best interests.
Does it work the same way for your clients? Because obviously you have to educate the market and you're building their digital platforms and solutions as well. So you really have to be experts before you go out to your clients, right?
Yes, and we have built over the past number of years a very, very robust client educational program infrastructure, but it's designed exactly the same. So we whenever we do learning programs for clients, which we do a lot, especially for executives, we have that same exact approach. So we talk about the 3 types of knowledge. We really focus on conditional knowledge. We talk about concepts. We talk about anti-patterns or misconceptions. We really, really emphasize all the different, it's just learning science. We apply learning science to our pedagogical tools to make sure that clients are really learning what they need to learn. And then, of course, again, we back all of that up with practice and feedback and reflection and assessment. And all of those things kind of factor into the learning programs. And importantly, when we go to clients and say, hey, we have a great learning program for you, we promise them that if they, if they are requiring these programs, that they're supporting people to do them, that they will see a delta. They will see growth in what their employees know and can do, because we know the science of learning and we've applied the science of learning. And so we are able to show from beginning to end that our clients have learned significantly. They have much higher scores on their performance measures. And so clients can be confident that there's directionally, right now, they have helped address one of those variables. And so if they're still not seeing employees demonstrating those behaviors, that there's other reasons besides what those employees know and can do to explain that. Have to think about new behaviors from the lens of not just what a person knows and can do, but what is the environment around the person that is motivating them to perform in certain ways. And what I often see with organizations is that they're so focused on addressing the knowledge gap.
Right.
And they forget that there are all these other, like, humans are, in many ways very simple. Like, humans will behave in certain ways if they have the right opportunity and motivation. And so if you've given them the knowledge and they're still not doing it, there are a limited number of variables that will explain that. And so you have to systematically go through each one and figure out what's the problem, and then you solve for that problem. Knowledge is just one variable of several that need to be addressed in order to see behavior change that translates into business outcomes.
Yeah, very good. So a before and after scenario is pretty much what you're describing here.
Yes.
And I'm curious, do you ever talk about unlearning? Because obviously my personal experience is also I'm getting into a new software, I just learned that, getting up to speed. And then another software comes along, which is cheaper, more efficient, cooler features. I'll switch. But then again, it's not exactly the same software. So I have to relearn and sort of unlearn what I've just did in the other piece.
Yes, then that's true of anything, right? Like,
Yep.
unlearning is it's one of the hardest. It's very hard to do, right? It's because learning is like a muscle. Like, once you, or behave like a muscle, like once you have kind of gotten into the habit of behaving in a certain way, it's really hard to remember to not do that same thing you used to do. And so, yes, so unlearning is something that we have to think about all the time. And again, there's no real trick to this. It's just a matter of it's repetition, and it's having, again, the right motivation, and like making sure that you're not accidentally reinforcing the old behavior you're trying to get rid of, because it makes unlearning even harder. But it's a matter of reflection, feedback, repetition. Like that is how you unlearn stuff and relearn the new stuff.
Yeah. And personally, I don't think that you ever can learn too much, because you can always relate one task, in this case, to something else that is fairly similar. So you've learned anyways, right? If a company with less resources want to prepare for the future, what's your advice to them? Because obviously at EPAM Systems, you do have a lot of resources. You built your own products for supporting this at scale. You're a skills-based organization, keeping track of the data from the market, from your employees, right? But where should you start if you want to prepare for the future with less resources?
There are a few things that are required to get from wherever you are with your existing tool set to where EPAM is, or somewhere very similar. The first and most important thing that I would say, and this is the cheapest thing actually, is that you need to get high quality data on the denominator, the demand, what tasks are actually done in your organization, because it will be the foundation for helping you do several different things. So if I could give everybody one piece of advice that they were going to go down this kind of skills journey, it's to purchase task intelligence there's all these different vendors that offer it. The best vendors offer task intelligence. Now, this is coming from labor market data. This is where it always comes from. And it takes all the work and it breaks it down into like these very granular chunks called tasks. Importantly, the best vendors will take each one of those tasks and they will tag that task as more or less automatable or AI-able. this is very, very important, because as we're thinking about the future, and this is what we should be all doing, we need to start to recognize where AI and automation are going to come in to the work that is done by humans today. And so this task foundation is a great, great tool, not just for the people organization to start to look ahead and look down the pike, but to give to the business, who is currently in many organizations trying to build AI things and don't always know where to invest their resources. This task intelligence tool will actually give you and the business a good idea of where to invest. But beyond that, right, it serves as the foundation for what skills do you need as a business. So, like, instead of trying to solve for what skills do people have, which is important, it has to get solved for, that stuff doesn't matter. Like, the skills employees have don't matter if you don't know what skills you need, because you won't know if there are gaps. And so I think the number one most important thing is to get high quality data on the denominator. What tasks does your business need to have done, and what are the skills required to do those? And then that information gets used by the business and the people organization to, like, start to future-proof, as you said, the company.
Excellent, because we cannot have this discussion in 2025 without touching upon AI, right? And now we're right there. So this puts a lot of new pressure on organizations, but also on HR teams, right? How should they approach this?
The whole people organization needs to do a few things differently in the very near term. So one is to really understand AI, not just how to use AI, that's helpful, but really understanding how AI is likely to impact your business. And that means impacting all the work that's done in the business, right? So this is where task intelligence is very, very helpful. It helps you get a sense of, like, if AI was implemented today, we could just snap our fingers and, like, AI is there. What would that look like for existing roles in the business today? That's really important to know. Then another thing is that we have to get, as an industry, as a people organization, have to get very, very comfortable with data, which I think a lot of people are not, right? A lot of people organization, like leaders and employees, are not as data savvy as the business, and certainly not as much as we need to be. And so that was a very important thing for us to get comfortable with and better at. And then the third thing, I think, which is my favorite part of this whole thing, is that we need to, as learning leaders, actually start focusing on learning, not on training content, but on understanding what people know and can do, measuring that, and then providing them the resources to get better at whatever that thing is. And then again, this is not just content, right? It's also practice and feedback and assessment. And very importantly, it's all of those strive elements of informal learning. So we as a field need to start to wrap our heads around, how do you measure learning and how do you support it outside of just training courses? And, like, how do you build a learning culture? How do you build an informal learning infrastructure? How do you do all of these things that are ultimately going to be what creates value for the business, which is helping people develop new skills that they don't have today?
I love that, because the demand is out there, and that's where you have an opportunity to create business value, right?
Yes.
Okay, Sandra, time is running out here. And as we wrap up, this conversation has been a masterclass in how learning and knowledge sharing can truly drive business impact, I believe. From embedding skills into operations to educating clients and navigating constant change, EPAM's approach offers valuable lessons for any organization looking to turn knowledge into a competitive edge. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And before we wrap up, what's the one key message or idea that you hope sticks with our audience from this conversation, Sandra?
Oh, there's so many. I would say ultimately, I think that the future success of business is going to be defined by how effective they are at getting people to learn. I think the learning organization is going to become one of, if not the most important functions in the business. And that means that it is incumbent on us to get really good, really fast at All those things that I just said. Measuring learning, building effective learning experiences, both formal and informal, and effectively communicating all of that to our business colleagues with data.
Excellent. Thank you again, Sandra, for sharing your expertise here today. And for anyone listening, make sure to follow Sandra on LinkedIn and check out her insights and work at EPAM on skills-based transformation. Links will be available in the description below of this episode. And to you, our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on learnster.com or in Spotify app, and let us know what topics you'd like to hear about next. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and as always, stay hungry for knowledge.